Well, did you get to know somebody better than you could in a chat in a pub?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course you've only tried this for about half an hour, and normally we do it for 2 hours, and we give you a much bigger menu, and we get you to talk about every aspect of life. But on this occasion, we are focusing on what you can do about work. And what I'd like is to discover what kind of activities interest you. As I said previously, to find a job is something you go to the job centre and they don't help you all that much, and you go around trying to introduce yourself into an occupation and a position which was not meant for you. You have to fit into it. And the job was invented for industrial, commercial purposes, and it takes no account of a personal character or your personal ambitions, which you have to put aside and use only in your spare time. And that, I think, is a weakness which one ought to try and get round, and that is what we have got to invent. How you can take your interests and your knowledge and say, let us make a job around it, and let us get people who can collaborate to create something which would make each one of you a more interesting person. Now, I don't know yet what your job interests are, but I know what Joan's interests are. Joan is a librarian, and what I was going to say to her is, how can we make the librarian's work more exciting and more valuable to the public? And I think one of the thoughts which I'd like to suggest to you, and I'd like to hear your reactions to, is this. It is quite hard to make people take interest in a particular book you've just bought. You put hundreds of books, thousands of books on shelves, and it is potluck, who reads what. But compared to the number of people who visit you, several million have gone to see the film about Lincoln, President Lincoln. And of course there is much to discuss about that. And I wondered whether the library would fit in with the current interests of the public. If 1 million people go there, then you've got to say, look, we are going to talk about not just Lincoln, because Lincoln was a president, he was a public servant. And what is the role of public service in the future of work? How can we get people to think about, when you go into government, you are constrained by all its bureaucracies and its habits and so on. And does that suit you? How else could it be? Everybody's complaining that there is too much bureaucracy. What else could public service be? And then you've got a subject for discussion which gives interest to all the people in the public service. And that's 25% of the population. And so, if it's properly organized, you would be able to get a large attendance, and then you would give them a book about Lincoln, and give them a book perhaps about bureaucracy. So you have to find something which was really intelligent on that subject. And something might come out of it. And this is of direct interest to them. How do you respond to that idea?
That sounds really interesting. It sounds like an amazing sort of reading group or display or a talk. Local people would bring local people together. What does everyone else think?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Well, in other words, not just have a display about Lincoln as an individual, but the impact of Lincoln as a public servant, and then take that more broadly and relate that to ourselves and to others who also work as public servants or who are in that field.
You could maybe play Lincoln next to the Iron Lady, the film The Iron Lady, and see the difference.
And think about that.
Yeah.
And the
Like public
contrast.
servants.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to not be simply public servants who would be interested, the public, which is uses the public service, has got something to say about it. And they can give their view as the customers, as it were. And that's just one example of how a profession can move out of the silo in which it normally lives and thinks only about the internal politics, which are, I don't know, will tell me how disastrous it is in your field, but in everything I've seen, it's very difficult. And when I've entered into, when I've been invited into public service committees and so on, commissions, I've always seen that lots of very clever people are stuck, and there's a great deal of frustration. And it's very difficult to get things moving. And that's what one got to discuss. Now, who among you has got a profession which he would like to raise as a possible subject of discussion?
Anyone?
Well, I can talk about the current thing that I kind of invented myself. The absence of nobody taking the opportunity. My name is Joe Cobham. I fell into some disagreement with my previous employers in 2010, and they thought they could block me from employment. But I welcomed the challenge. I set my brain to thinking, and since then I've not been in any employment, and I created some kind of calendar that is surrounded by adverts all around it. You have the calendar in the middle and adverts all around it, and my target market is small businesses, and I charge them ridiculously small price, so I can get like pretty good market share. Taking the businesses from news shopper, local papers, I charge small businesses £50 a year, and that's incredible. And I showed it to Edmund here, and I'm sure he liked it. So I just came up with that invention, and it's actually doing well. So I just want to advise that with the current situation right now, people got to think entrepreneurial, and that's how I got that going, and it's just doing well.
That is brilliant.
Thank you.
And you see, advertising is a very interesting subject, because that advertising is a kind of tax. Because when you charge these businesses £50, they have to add 2 pennies or something to the price of what they sell. And you are therefore getting a tax from the public to keep you alive. And the other problem about advertising is that half of what advertising says is not true. And that is another very good subject to discuss. How can we make it honest? And the most amazing statistics that has recently come out is that there are now 4 times more public relations officers than there are journalists. The purpose of a journalist is to puncture what ministers say and to reveal scandals and to tell the truth in theory. And the purpose of public relations officers is to give one side of the story on behalf of those who pay them. Now there are 4 times as many, and you will see that when you listen to the news tomorrow on the BBC, they will say the Minister for Health is going to make a speech today in which he will say.
That's right.
He hasn't said it yet. How do we know what he will say? Because the public relations officer has pushed it there. And half of the BBC News is now written by public relations officers. And journalists are complaining that they are now forced to say what the public relations people tell them. And the question which comes to me is, I prefer to know the truth. I don't want to be fooled. How do you do this? What are we going to do? Transparency is something which everybody talks about, but there's very little of it. And of course, the people who have studied lying, have said the amount of lies in business is increasing.
Yes.
And we have seen some very remarkable, such Enron was the most famous one, of people just inventing the accounts. And even the accountants inventing accounts. And so we have there a big problem. And we should get people like you who can ask difficult questions, and we should invite advertisers. We should invite the famous people like Lord Saatchi and say, what do you say about this? And is it inevitable that we have to live in a society of lies? And in this I would introduce also the question of private life, because in private life, if you tell lies, your private life is destroyed because you cannot be trusted. So, what is the future of truth? And there, Joan, your library has got to produce books about liars and about honesty. And this is all the little businessmen and big businessmen who say, eat this food and it'll make you happy. Without adding, it will also make you fat. But they don't say that. So, how are we going to do this? And the answer is, it's public opinion which develops ways of doing it. It's got to come from below. It could not come from on top. Now, what you've been discussing is retail trade. Retail trade we've specialized on because it is the most, the biggest influence on prices. And for example, if you buy a pint of milk, the amount that the farmer gets is about 25% of what you pay for it. Since one of the main problems of life now is that prices are too high. All of you are suffering because you haven't got enough money. And all your efforts to get more money are in vain because everything is going to become more expensive as you become richer. And that has happened. And the price in London is ridiculous. And what can we do? And so when one goes to IKEA or one goes to any supermarket, one discovers what is going on there. And the only way one can begin it is by saying, how can we begin some change? And that is what the film tried to show. Let us see how it can offer something more than just what it sells. It can offer culture and education free. And that reduces, in a way, the price of the tables and chairs. And it can also do something for the people who make the thing they sell. And I recall how I went to India at the invitation of IKEA, and I met the people who made those lampshades which you saw. A big factory with 200 women who were just sitting there making lampshades. And there's no contact between the buyer and the seller. How can we be useful to them? How can they be useful to us by telling us about what they do? And the most interesting thing was that when I said to the owner, why didn't you offer them a bit of education at work? And he went to them and he said, do you want education? And they said, yes. Will you accept 1 hour loss of pay in order to have 1 hour of education? And 75% said yes, even though they were very poor. How can we provide education? How can we give people some advantages that we have? So there's so much to do now. And that is where, again, a library can organize a bit of reading on that subject. And I just think of one book I read recently, a book about slums in Mumbai. Amazing, millions of people living on just hand to mouth. And living on almost nothing. And here we are spending this fortune that we have to spend here. And it's all our own fault, you know. The more bonuses are paid to bankers, the more bankers are able to buy houses at high prices. The more the price of houses goes up, the less it is possible for you to get a house at a reasonable price. It is mad what is happening. And you see, unless we talk about it, it will just go on being mad. And if you think how changes have taken place, because people said, this is mad. And the strange thing about the current situation is that we are keeping silent and we're accepting it. But we cannot complain unless we have an alternative. And that is what is missing. And that is what libraries should be doing. Libraries are places to think. I got an email today from a man who has written a book about the pleasures of thinking. And I said to him, many people don't like thinking because it hurts. But it's a pleasure which is cultivated. Well, I've talked enough. I want you to discuss among yourself now what you think, and I want you to say also whether you're willing to participate in thinking, and whether the library is willing to, if not to give you a whole book, perhaps even just a chapter of a book to think about so it becomes a kind of popular university. No exams and all that, but just a place where you go to think and you use your brain in the same way as you go to eat to fill your body. And if you don't use your brain, as you know, you become stupid. It's a factual fact that if you don't use the brain, you then get Alzheimer's. I'll give you an example of that. There was the best study of Alzheimer's was made in a nunnery. And one of the nuns lived to about 95, and when she died, her brain was absolutely clear. And another one died at about 60, and her brain was a complete mess of Alzheimer's. And the difference was that the woman who lived very long was one of the leaders and thinkers of the nunnery, and she had always used her brain, and she was a very active woman. And the other one was just somebody who never did anything, never thought about anything. It's a very simple thing, just as your body collapses if you don't give it exercises, so does your brain. And we are going to have more and more Alzheimer's and more dementia, and old age is going to be more and more terrible. You know, so we're increasing the span of life, but the last 10 years of life are going to be torture. And that is the only way you stop letting your brain become full of muck. It's very simple. Do these ideas resonate with you? Is there something there that is meaningful to you?
I was interested in your advocating more thinking, because I found it very helpful to do meditation, which are actually about getting in touch with the side of the brain that does not do analytical thinking. I was always very good at analytical thinking when I was young. I passed lots of exams in it, but it didn't make me happy. Actually, I found doing things like meditation or dance, which are not about the intellectual brain working out what's wrong with things, have been very helpful. The intellectual brain has a lot to do with analysing risk and avoiding things that are painful, so it's about fear. Whereas the other side of the brain is more about feeling at one with the world, which is what people who practice meditation feel. And I quite agree that I enjoy intellectual discussions enormously, but I personally have found that they need to be balanced by that more touchy-feely side, from feeling at one with everybody through singing or dancing or meditation.
Yes, well, the question is how you balance these different activities. How much of intellectual thinking do you engage in? And do you do it every day? And do you do it about different subjects? And are you therefore training your mind not to decay? Or are you, what is it?
Oh, I think I'd like to spend much more time thinking and discussing with people than I do. It's difficult to find the people to have a really good intellectual discussion with, I find.
Exactly, because in normal chat, people avoid serious discussion. And what the Oxford Muse is trying to do is to give people opportunities to engage in using their brains, and to talking intelligently, and to being stimulated by other people and being asked questions which they can't answer, which make them think all night about it. I know many people who engage in meditation, and they say spend 20 minutes a day sort of calming down and freeing themselves from their anxieties. And that is, people do that because it's easy, you can do it at home by yourself, but you need someone else to stimulate you. And that is quite difficult to find, and that is why we need organizations which do it. And that is why when we organize conversations, we say 2 hours. Because we don't want to sit to gossip. And we've done a poll about what kind of conversation people engage in pubs. And we found that half of them say the conversations are totally trivial and of no importance and complete waste of time. and only 4% said that their conversation lasts more than half an hour. Now, if you think of half an hour, you're not saying very much in half an hour. For really important matters, you've got to think and discuss quite a lot and bring in many issues. And so we're just not giving enough time. And we're being drugged by television, which used to be more stimulating and which now goes in for simple things which cost much and which just enable people rest after work. And so we've got to do something. And I'm interested by what you said. Difficult to find people who are willing to discuss. And Joan, that is something else on your agenda.
It's a big agenda now.
All right. I just want to commend you because it looks like my mind kind of gelled with yours, because I mentioned to the presenter and Edmund that I'm writing a book called Balancing the Balance of Power. That means, for example, in a nutshell, making sure that the big establishments are not too big, suppressing the consumers or suppressing the small shops, small retailers. That's why my advertising calendar is geared towards the small businesses. For example, if a major establishment pays me big money, large money, I'm not going to accept them. That's my philosophy. So balancing the balance of power, for example, my suggestion to consumers would be, if you go to the bank, if you're not exactly rush for time, push for time, don't use the self-service machine, use the cashier. Because if you don't, you'll be putting one man out of job. If you go to Sainsbury's, don't use the self-service, because if you don't, you'll be putting another person out of job. Because at the end of the day, when the auditors come and check the productivity of machine and the productivity of humans, they will see that the machine is doing more, then they will eliminate the humans and the machine take over. That's why I'm writing Balancing the Balance of Power. Thank you.
Well, that's very interesting. I wonder whether you will win, because we are always being told that technology is going to produce robots, and when you go to the bank, you'll not even speak to a person, you'll speak to a robot, and you'll give the check and the robot will do the job. And they're producing the most amazing robots. They're producing robots for hospitals, so to get rid of the nurses. And it is just that technical people are so clever that they don't think about the consequence of what they're doing. And that is why I'm saying we have to invent jobs which are outside this kind of impasse. And we must do it pretty urgently, because we will be out of jobs. You see how in supermarkets they've now got cashiers, but they've also got automatic cashiers.
Yeah.
And soon there'll be no cashiers. I had a very good conversation with a supermarket cashier, young woman, perhaps 20, age 20. And she said to me, when she started working, she loved people, but now she hates them. Because the contact between people with a cashier is trivial. 1 minute, you know, nice day, oh, we're ceasing to be humans. We will all become robots. Well, what you say is very good. I wish you luck with your book. But whether your book will change anybody's mind, that is the question. Whether it will change people's actions. But as you know, the small shops are being destroyed. And they're all, you know, the streets are full of shops which are now empty. The system is not in favor of small shops. But you're right what you're saying. Well, who else has got a comment to make on these subjects?
I think it'd be interesting if some of the big retailers were prepared to do some things which showed that they were challenging the motive of just making profit and persuading people to buy things. Would a large superstore, for example, set up part of its company for second-hand furniture or their items which had been used before? I mean, for example, if there's 3 people living next door to each other, do they all need a lawnmower? One person could buy the lawnmower and they could all share it. I think there'll always be suspicion that IKEA or whoever ultimately won't do anything that will damage the bottom line. And if they could show that they were prepared to do some socially, helpful things, like exchanging furniture or or whatever, I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, and my answer to that is, you can't persuade them to do it because they will think, we will lose money. But what you can do is offer to start a small experiment on the side and say, look, let us try this out and see what it looks like. We're not saying change your whole system, just do an experiment. And I'd like to do that in many different occupations. How can we do things a bit differently? If you think about how anything is invented in science, it is always by doing experiments. And most experiments fail, but you go on until you hit the right thing. So the question is how we can persuade people, and that is by coming to them and saying, we want to try an experiment in your shop, in your business, in your factory. And it may cost you a bit, but it will win you prestige. It's better, the best kind of advertising you can get. It's much cheaper than half a minute on television. And that is what we did in IKEA. And they, as you see from what the manager said, they found it something which had not occurred to them. And they were worried that they were spending too much money. And it is difficult in bad times. But there are many opportunities. We've got to find the opportunities in them. For example, in a big supermarket, they get much fewer people coming when the weather is good. How can we use that time? So that's what one ought to think about. But it's a good suggestion that you're making.
I think the world needs more robots. I think if the world had more robots and we had more I don't think it's a bad thing that, there are less cashiers, essentially, because I think people should be focusing on more creative pursuits. I think people should be looking to the stars. We landed on the moon in '96, and it almost seems ever since then everyone's sort of like, I'm waiting for humans to jump on Mars and Jupiter and all these other planets, to inspire us. I mean, think about, there's probably like loads of geniuses that because of their their circumstances or whatever, they're just, they're just packing beans on a shelf. You was talking about how people, when they don't engage in intellectual pursuits, their brain almost goes dead, it goes numb. And I think a lot of people in retail, they feel like that, because I think there's a lot of people that don't want to wake up at 9 o'clock and worry about getting fired or not, and having to go and talk to your supervisor about a spillage on aisle 4. People want to be drawing, because I think essentially creativity is evolution. It's moving forward. I think
you're right. You're right, and it's interesting if you think about small shops. If you look at history, and there, Joe, you can get books about the history of keeping. 200 years ago, there were 5 times more little shops. There were plenty of little shops everywhere. And they would probably have only a few customers today. but they got to know their customers, and half of the shopkeepers in London would take in lodgers, and they would often invite their customers to supper. It was a completely different attitude, and they would give people credit, and possibly credit even for 1 or 2 years. When they know that somebody is out of work, they would just let him buy things without paying. It was personal, and now we are impersonal. And you're exactly right about going to work in a supermarket where you don't like the job doesn't do anything for you, you just got to earn your living. And that is a form of part-time slavery.
Yeah, and I think, a guy once said, humans were not made to toil in the mud. I think we should inspire, we should aim to better ourselves, to improve ourselves, to be better than the generation before us, to get on Mars. I mean, if we look at it on a sort of practical scale, the sun is getting hotter, and eventually, humans will need to find a place to put another colony somewhere, just things like that. Nobody really sort of thinks about those things because they're too wild, they're too it's almost ridiculous. It's just, everyone's more about the present rather than the future. That's why the environment's in so much trouble, because no one...
So what is your experience on which you base, what has made you think like that?
Because I think, we have things like global warming and everyone just treats it so casually. I mean, the whole idea that the polar ice caps are melting, I just think that's pretty bad. And I'm not saying, I'm out there and recycling all the time, blah, 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 but I just think it's a shame a lot of people aren't.
What kind of work have you had experience of which makes you speak like that?
Well, I used to work on like the Dust Truck Solution Council. Like I used to like litter pick a lot and sort of like sweep, and people, they just throw their stuff on the floor. They don't care, they go to a shop, they buy a can, they drink their juice, and then they throw a can away. No one really thinks to recycle. No one really thinks where rubbish goes. Like, and I used to work, a place where you go all over like the bar, collecting loads of rubbish, and then eventually it will just get burned, like for renewable energy. And I think in the short term, that's really cool. We're getting energy from waste, but in the long term, Selchip in Deptford is just pumping loads and loads of rubbish into our atmosphere that our kids and our kids' kids are going to breathe in, and and it affects the environment as well. A lot of people, they see foxes. There's a lot of foxes now in London and stuff like that, and they're just going, see, it's because you banned fox hunting. That's why there's so many foxes. But it's not getting down to the root of the issue. Well, if people are more aware of their rubbish, like leaving their rubbish bags or not wasting so much food, then we wouldn't have so much foxes.
Yeah.
It's just things like that. It's we live in a society where there's just a lot of short-term solutions, but not a lot of long-term.
I think in schools now they're talking about and teaching the kids how to recycle more. So even if their parents weren't learned it in school, they're able to tell their parents, and now everyone has green recycle bins. Everyone hopefully recycles now. Do you know what I mean? My kids can recycle, and I hope my grandson can recycle, but he does try and stuff like that. So I think education is the key, and the libraries as well. Because I work in a community library, and we recycle everything. And we take in recycling free of charge from all around the area, around the community. We recycle books, anything that's given away we try and sell, or we recycle it.
You'll be
to help out the community,
furniture soon, won't you?
To help out the community. We also recycle laptops and computers if anyone wants one to sell. But yeah, we do actually recycle everything. So we think we're helping, do you know what I mean? And if we can educate our customers, because...
But you see, there's an interesting point there. We give things to be recycled, Now, again, 200 years ago, you would not throw anything away. You would keep it and then see how you could do something with it yourself.
Yeah, we do try and keep as much as we can. What we do is we recondition computers and we give them to the elderly free of charge, and we give them lessons on how to email their family during the day, because you know you can't ring your daughter or your son if you're elderly during the day if they're at work. So we teach them how to email, and we set up a computer in your home free of charge, and that's from someone recycling in the community.
But we've got a problem there, because if we did not throw clothes away because they was out of fashion, and if we repaired our clothes, as they used to do 200 years ago, there would be an economic crisis, because we have a system which requires you to throw everything away and buy a new dress every year because they've got to be a different colour.
But the clothes that we get donations of, we wash them and we repair them, we hand sew them as well, and we sell them at a boot sale at the end of every month to help in the community, to help pay for stuff within the community.
We need more things like that, but the problem is not a lot of people are sort of taking the initiative to do that, you know.
But it's in all the libraries. If you go to any of the libraries, it's all in there. What we can recycle, what we can't recycle. All the information is there.
But it's awareness.
But it's getting it into the school. It's actually in the schools already.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's just up to, I think it's up to you individually. If you want to recycle at home, well, you will recycle at home if you have that extra few minutes every day to recycle, or even think about what you're recycling, or think about what you're throwing away. Even think about what you buy. Do you really need to buy that, or where did it come from? Is it, is it made locally? Things like that. All you need to do is think about what you're buying and think about what you're throwing away. And I think it's an individual thing.
But it shouldn't be an individual thing. It should be a communal thing. I think these kind of things should be discussed and pressed, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, but you can't make someone not recycle if they don't want to recycle. They say, "Oh, I haven't got the time," and it's all going to be recycled anyway. It's going to go to a dump and it's going to be recycled there anyway. Because my brother works in a recycling company and they actually get so much rubbish, it's unbelievable. But they recycle it all.
Yeah.
So it is up to them to do that as well, do you know what I mean?
But you see, if you followed your advice and you did not buy things you did not need, the economy would go bankrupt. And that is the problem with the economy now, that people are not buying anything because they've got no money. And so we've invented a system which is causing us to always be poor, because we always have to buy things because something is necessary. And your children must always be telling you that everybody else in school has got this or that, so we must have it also.
Could we live without money eventually, do you think?
Like we did at the start, to go full circle.
Yeah, just completely get rid of money, the concept of money.
That's impossible.
And we go back to the Stone Age.
It wasn't impossible before it was invented.
That's what I was thinking.
It worked before it was invented.
But money's always.
People traded food for food.
Or they've exchanged something.
Yeah, currency has always, existed. I think, we live, the West, capitalism exploits sort of money. The gap between the rich and the poor is ridiculous. But if you look at money in its purest sense, it's essentially a universal language. It's quite similar to music. You can have. It encourages trade. You might not be able to sort of speak with someone and understand how much something is worth, but I don't know, when you have money, it just allows people. Well, I'm just a big fan of agriculture, because you think about this country, in terms of takeaways, I don't want to eat fish and chips every day. I want an Indian on Wednesday, or a Chinese on Thursday, or whatever. And it's because we have sort of money, a sort of globalization, I think it's called, or something like that. We can have these things and these different experiences. We can taste things all over the world.
I'd agree with you there.
Yeah, I think money's a brilliant thing. It's just used in the wrong way. It's just exploited, and I think we just need to reapproach the way how we trade, how we use money. think we should just go to eradicating money all of a sudden. Because what do you replace that with? I mean, because people are always gonna want to trade. They're always gonna want to, whether it's trading ideas, whether it's trading material. They're always going to want something. They're always gonna go, oh, that looks nice.
Well, Joan, this is another subject for your discussion. Money. Nobody has enough money. The rich don't have enough money.
Yeah.
And a very rich man was asked recently, why don't you give more of your money away? And he said, this worried me a great deal, and then I thought about it, and then he said, well, you see, every time you want to buy a master painting, it costs such a lot of money, and so I can't give it away because I've got to buy paintings. And he's got to buy paintings because that's what rich people do. They put £1 million into a painting by some artist who lived in a garret and starved, and who's now popular 100 years after his death. And this question of money, you're quite right what you say, that money is useful and money is misused. And how can one stop it? And if one looks at the origins of money, one sees that in elementary societies, it was considered wrong to hoard money. It was considered to hoard. If you had a lot, you gave it away to others. And you got respect because you gave it away. But then when money came in, you could hoard. And that is what happened, and you hoard it, and then you lend it to people at a big rate of interest, and you get richer and richer. And so we've got a dilemma there, which we have not solved. And so to your discussion, you will invite a banker as well as people with no money, which is most people.
I think in America, people get kudos from giving money away. It's quite socially acceptable in America to talk about supporting charities, and they design the tax system to encourage people to give money to charities. There seems to be more private giving in America than there seems to be in Britain.
Yes, well, it's very interesting what happens in philanthropy and giving away. The proportion of money of an income that rich people give away is smaller than what poor people give away. Poor people are more generous. And what big philanthropists are doing, in fact, is saying, I don't want to pay taxes. I'm going to use my money my own way. So the government can use taxes to do what it wants, and I'm going to use my money to do what I want. So these are like barons of medieval times who have their own little world. And this question of philanthropy is a difficult one. So I'm trying to invite a banker and philanthropist and people who receive charity, and it may be that people who receive charity don't like receiving charity. It's a difficult question. So there we have so many subjects which Lewisham is going to make people think of it. And you see, when you compare what happens in universities, they don't really do this kind of thinking. They tend to teach you to prepare you for an exam and so on, rather than to base it on real life and experience of people. Well, it's about 9:30, isn't it? And you may, unless you want to say something, I'll let John conclude the proceedings. I invite you all to write something on the evaluation page of the menu so that we know what you think, because this is This is an experiment to see what people think. So please, fill the tick out, give it to John. And thank you very much for coming. And thank you for allowing us to meet in the library. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I was very interested by what you said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.